Joining us now, Colonel Stephen Maxwell, Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. Colonel, thanks for coming in, sir.
Thank you for having us, Troy.
You bet. So, first of all, tell us about the Bureau of Narcotics. It was established in the 70s, I believe. And what is its mission? What's its role exactly?
Yes, sir. So your Bureau of Narcotics, the state's Bureau of Narcotics, was established in 1971. And today we have evolved to an agency where we have roughly a little more than 90 sworn agents, that are functioning throughout the state, working with local law enforcement and bridging the gap between local law enforcement and state law enforcement, as well as state district attorneys' offices and the U.S. attorney's offices, enforcing our state's Uniform Controlled Substance Act.
Okay. And so do all states have an organization similar to this, to your knowledge?
Well, Mississippi is unique in the sense that we are one of two states, Mississippi and Oklahoma, that have a state agency that is specifically focused on enforcing its state's Uniform Controlled Substance Act. And
okay.
I think that, with the leadership of our governor and our legislature, we're poised going forward in the future to tackle some of the issues like what we're here to discuss today.
Yeah, and that is fentanyl, which is something that has been, of course, all over the news. And latest report I saw, Colonel, stated that I believe in the last 12 months in this country, 100,000 people have lost their lives to fentanyl overdoses. Is that accurate to your knowledge? I mean, that blew me away when I saw those figures. What is this? Where's it coming from? And why is it so deadly?
Well, so 2.5 milligrams of fentanyl is a lethal dose to 95+% of our nation's population. And in addition to that, because it is so cheap, drug cartels, primarily the Sinaloa cartel, just south of our United States border there in Texas, they order the precursory chemicals from China. And because it's so cheap and because it's so potent, small amounts of it can be, cut, laced, colored, and scored. And because of its diverse properties, pressed into fake pills. And it's also used as a lace for other drugs such as heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, so forth and so on. And the market has been saturated with it, which presents an imminent threat to public safety and public health to all communities throughout the state of Mississippi.
Is this an addictive substance, Colonel?
Fentanyl is highly addictive, and not only does it have extremely high addictive propensities, but it also has an extremely high propensity for abuse, causing overdose, and then that overdose resulting in death as well.
When a person takes it, you talked about how such a small amount can be deadly, and I guess give a high as well. I just wonder how many people don't even know they're actually ingesting it when they do. They think they're ingesting cocaine, heroin, whatever else it's been cut with. How many people are just kind of in general terms, are just looking to get fentanyl?
Well, so people who are battling substance use disorder and drug addiction, it is a disease, and so they are battling a disease, and they want to get high, but they don't want to die.
Sure.
And because there's so much adulterated fentanyl right now in communities throughout the state of Mississippi and across the country, and because it's so cheap and it's plentiful and its unique properties, as I said, it's being pressed, cut, colored, and scored. It's being used as a lace and a cutting agent. And so you may be dealing with someone and thinking that you're buying cocaine, or thinking that you're buying heroin or Xanax or Oxycontin or oxymorphone or hydromorphone, but you're actually purchasing fentanyl that's been pressed, cut, colored, and scored, and it's being sold as those things, or those drugs have been laced and cut. So many people don't know that they're actually consuming fentanyl.
I got you. Wow. So tell us about what you're seeing in the state of Mississippi. Is there an uptick in the amount that is flowing around our state? Are you seeing are you capturing people, I guess, and arresting people for possession or whatever else the crime in accordance with our statutes is? You just seeing more of this out there.
So what we're seeing in the state of Mississippi is a microcosm of what's happening throughout the country. And as your Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics works with police departments and sheriff's departments throughout the state, and we bridge the gap between federal agencies, we are seeing and have seen and continue to see, a plentiful amount of fentanyl being sold as fake pills, being sold as other illicit drugs as well. And so, this illicit, adulterated fentanyl has literally saturated the illicit drug market.
Is it is it produced in ingestible form before it crosses our border, or do we have factories and plants, if you will, laboratories that are making fentanyl the way they do methamphetamine and so forth?
So Mexican drug cartels are the primary source of fentanyl here in the United States, and it typically comes across our border in two forms, in a powder or in pill forms. But even those pills can be recrushed and they can be recut.
Gotcha.
And of course, the powder, once it gets here, it can be cut even more, and then it can be pressed, cut, colored, and scored and sold as pills as well, or sold as other fake illicit drugs.
Are the cartels? Is it their operatives that are carrying this fentanyl across the border, or are they forcing others, maybe as a condition of getting them into the country, to kind of be the carrying agents for them?
well, the cartels use the same science and technology and transportation, mechanisms that we use in the legitimate market. And unfortunately, a number of the individuals who are coming across our border, that are being contacted by, CBP, are working with the cartel. They have wholesale sources of supply, strategically located, here in our country, unfortunately. And their primary goal is to ensure that product, the adulterated fentanyl, makes it to communities not only across the country but here in Mississippi.
Wow. So what do we got to do about this? What can we do to stop the flow and to convince people to be careful and just not to take this stuff, that it could hurt them and kill them?
Well, what we've got to do is we've got to continue to travel down a thoroughfare of having a multi-pronged, multidiscipline, and multifaceted effort. And that is, a number of agencies working together, law enforcement, treatment facilities, and also agencies like the Mississippi Department of Mental Health and Department of Health working together to educate and empower, Mississippians. And I think that we can educate and empower and not proliferate, the continued use of drug abuse and drug addiction here in the state. And of course, we've been talking about fentanyl test strips, and I think that that's one object, one item that we can make much more accessible to the public.
How does that work, Colonel? Sorry to interrupt. How does that work, the test strip?
So the fentanyl test strips were developed along the line as the same science for urine test strips that are used, routinely throughout the day to test urine for drugs.
Okay.
So the same science was used in the development of these fentanyl test strips. And it's usually, the ratio is usually milliliters of water to milligrams of the substance. And you mix it together in water, and then, you dip the strip in the solution. And for a certain period of time, you pull it out, and then the strip yields a binary qualitative result. Either yes, it contains fentanyl or one of its analogs, or no, it does not.
Okay, gotcha. So how does one get the strips?
Well, right now, there's conversation ongoing in the state of Mississippi of whether or not the strips are considered paraphernalia.
Okay.
And, our position is that the strips are not considered paraphernalia because within the statute, which is 4129-105, that lays out the definition for paraphernalia in Section V5, there is a subsection, V22, which states that courts and other authorities, in considering what an item is as it relates to paraphernalia, should take this into consideration, and that is the existence and scope of legitimate use of the object in the community. Okay. And what I can tell you right now, in communities across the state of Mississippi, there is a legitimate reason for us not to consider these strips as paraphernalia. Within the past 2 years, we've lost more than 1,000 Mississippians to drug-related overdose deaths. Now, I want to put that in perspective for you, Gerard. So that's 1,000 families that have been impacted. Okay, and if that person was a spouse, that's 1,000 spouses. If that person was a parent, that's 1,000 children. If that person was a child, that's more than 1,000 parents. If they were employed, that's more than 1,000 businesses over the course of the past 2 years, having lost more than 1,000 Mississippians to drug-related overdose deaths. And so we can empower and educate by making these strips much more accessible and not proliferate drug abuse and drug use.
Gosh. We got a break right here. Colonel, if you can stick around, got a couple more questions for you and want to hear more about this, and more importantly, what we can do to stop this scourge of drugs and drug addiction and drug overdoses for sure. We got Colonel Stephen Maxwell, Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics in the Element Well Studios. We're coming right studios with Colonel Stephen Maxwell, Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics. So, Colonel, again, you're mentioning that 1,000 people in Mississippi died of drug overdoses last year, and you really put it in perspective when you described all the other implications of that and all the other consequences of that, and that really does make you stop and think. It's something that we don't want to see anybody die of drug overdoses. I've always said, if people want to put that stuff in their body, they're going to figure out a way to do it. But you made a great point, which is they're not looking to kill themselves. They're not looking to die from ingesting these deadly drugs. They're looking for a high. It's an addiction, but all too often that goes awry, and that's terrible. It's an horrific outcome. It's something we got to work on. I wanted to find out first, what are we doing in the schools? I know a lot of this sort of gets started, a lot of the peer pressure, et cetera. We've all been through school. We've all been there. It's no secret that drugs are widely available in the schools, in the K through 12 environments. Are we educating our children, these students, about the dangers and the risk, particularly of fentanyl?
So, Jerome, that's a great question. And what I can tell you, I shared a statistic with our commissioner, Sean Tyndall, some time ago, which came out in a 2020 SAMHSA report on drug use and health. And I was telling the commissioner that based on that report, 670 adolescents here in the United States on a daily basis initiate prescription opioid misuse. And the commissioner was alarmed by that, as we all are. And so as a result of that, he has supported us in broadening, our drug demand reduction program. And so we are working with school district superintendents across the state of Mississippi, working to try to get in the schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. And also we hope to look forward to work with college presidents and universities across the state of Mississippi as well, to talk to them about the diverse products that are available, how easily they're accessible, but yet more it's so than anything, how toxic they are.
Yeah.
And you may think that you're purchasing an Adderall to study for exams, but it literally can be fentanyl that's been pressed, cut, colored, and scored and sold to you. And that last pill that you take could be your last breath that you take.
Yeah, it just seems like, Colonel, that I recall when I was in school, some of the information that was shared with us, and sometimes it was by law enforcement. And it was kind of scary, and it needs to be scary, honestly. No different than going through driver's ed training when you see the crash sites of folks that are behind the wheel when they're intoxicated and what happens to them. And hopefully that scares you a little bit so that you don't go out and do that same thing. And that seems like an effective way, I think, to persuade these youngsters to stay away from that stuff. But I guess it's been heightened somewhat. The risk has been heightened somewhat with this deadly fentanyl, which you often don't know even exists in what you're consuming. You can't detect it. Maybe these test strips are a solution to that. But unwittingly, they end up ingesting this deadly drug, and then they lose their lives. And it's now, I believe, the number one killer, if I'm not mistaken, of young people within a certain age range, 18 to 29, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, but in this country.
Yes,
so
sir.
More are dying of that than just normal death or disease or et cetera. And these are unforced deaths. These are unnecessary deaths.
Yes, sir. I think you use the term unnecessary, adequately and appropriately, because they are preventable. And you're talking about more people dying as a result of drug-related overdose death than those in car crashes and homicides.
It's just unbelievable to think about. All right, so what do you need, Colonel, from a state law perspective? Are you working with the members of the legislature, our lawmakers? This test strip deal seems to me like a no-brainer. What am I missing here? I mean, if this can save lives, this isn't harming anyone. I get our laws, our present statutes, but sometimes they have to be amended because things change, technology changes, and this is an example of it.
Well, we'll tell you. So our legislature did a really good job this last session. We got the Victoria Huggins Peel Press Act, and we also got Parker's Law.
Yeah.
And, we've been in communication with Representative Lee Yancey and Jill Ford. Mm-hmm. Just earlier this week, we visited with them at the legislature in a committee hearing, and this is on their radar. This is a priority for them. And, Commissioner Tyndall, the Bureau of Narcotics, we're going to make ourselves available, the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, to dialogue with the legislature in this session to bring some clarity to the definition as to what is paraphernalia. And so what I can tell you right now is in convenience stores across the state of Mississippi, you can walk in these stores and you can buy pipes, you can buy hookahs, you can buy bongs. And these items and objects are utilized for the ingestion of drugs. And we all know that. But they don't educate and they don't inform anyone of whether or not a drug contains fentanyl or any of its analogs, but you can purchase these things. And with regards to fentanyl strips, you can be riding around in your car with Ziploc bags or baggies or any other item and not have drugs in your possession, and they're not considered paraphernalia as well. Okay. And so, that's why we've taken this position right now up until the point we're able to work with the legislature in this upcoming session with regards to fentanyl strips, being made accessible to the public, to Mississippians.
Yeah. All right, so I don't want to get political on you here, and I know you won't anyhow in your position, and I fully respect and appreciate that. But I got to ask you, have you seen an increase in the flow of fentanyl since we've relaxed the security at the border?
Absolutely. Not only have we seen an increase in the amount of fentanyl that's in communities across the state of Mississippi, our seizures are up, and as we work, our investigations and a covert capacity, our purchases are up as well.
Yeah, and I got to believe the cartels, they know this. They're aware of this as well, and so business is good for them, and they're producing more, and it seems like they across the border carrying this stuff uninhibited. Well,
unfortunately, they are familiar with the same statistics that we are. When we talk about adolescents that initiate prescription opioid use, when we talk about, almost 60 million Americans being identified, as having used or dealing with a substance use disorder, the 28,000 pregnant parenting women in Mississippi identified by the Mississippi Department of Mental Health battling a substance use disorder. So they're familiar with these statistics, and they know we have an insatiable appetite, unfortunately, in this country for getting high. It's the reason why we have rainbow fentanyl now. It's the reason why we have such a diversified product line containing these toxic chemicals and drugs.
Anything they can do to disguise it just to get people to consume it and then to get them hooked on it so they keep going back to it. That's the game they're playing, and they're getting enriched as a result of it. What about working with other law enforcement agencies? How do you guys integrate at the MBN?
So we do a really good job of bridging the gap between local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. In addition to that, bridging the gap between our state district attorney's office and our U.S. attorney's office. And, I've got to give a shout out to our prosecutors across the state. They're doing a very good job. They've got their finger on the pulse of the issues associated with, with the drug culture as well. And so in working with local law enforcement agencies across the state, what they realize, as we realize, is that there are so many other community issues that appendage out from the drug culture, such as violent crime, such as sexual assaults, armed robberies, burglaries, so forth and so on. Human trafficking as well. And, I remember in the early days of working drug investigations, when we would execute search warrants, we literally at that time would be stepping over victims of human trafficking, passing by pregnant mothers and children. And now through this broadened partnership, this multidisciplinary partnership, we're working with the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Health, hopefully to bring the services to those people now, where in the past that we weren't, in working with our law enforcement partners.
What about your staffing at the MBN? You doing okay there? You're looking for staff?
Well, Commissioner Tyndall, his vision for our agency is to get us up to 150 agents, and he's been doing a very good job. You said we have 90 right now? Roughly about 91, okay. And he's doing a very good job of that, and we know that he's going to be successful working with our legislature in this upcoming session, ensuring that the Bureau of Narcotics has what it needs to enforce our state's Uniform Controlled Substance Act.
Do most of your recruits enter the MBN directly, or do they come from the Highway Patrol or other law enforcement?
So our recruitment process is unique. We have applicants, who apply to come work for us that are police officers, that are sheriff's deputies, and they may work for other state law enforcement agencies and just college graduates. And so for those of you who are in college, who are working for a department right now, sheriffs and police chiefs, don't get upset with me. We hope to be posting another vacancy announcement sometime around the beginning of the year, and we want you to come apply and work for us.
Well, I just don't want anybody else to get hurt or die from all this and all the other consequences, and we got to stop this flow of fentanyl into our country and into this state. We appreciate all your work and all your effort and all those who work at the MBN. Thanks a lot, Colonel, for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate Colonel Stephen Maxwell, Director of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, for joining Middays. We're coming right back.